Evening, everyone. Welcome to the American Cinematheque, the Los Feliz 3. How you doing? All right. We are here to see one of the funniest movies ever made, Mel Brooks' classic, The Producers, introduced by our good buddy, Greg Proops from the Greg Proops Film Club. This is all part of our Friend of the Fest, as we said, where we bring our favorite podcasters to our favorite theaters to introduce their favorite movies. Some shows still happening. After this one at 10 p.m., we've got Johnny Mnemonic, the great Keanu Reeves classic, introduced by our neighbors over at Skylight Books. Tomorrow night, we've got Dana Gould from the Dana Gould Hour introducing Carnival of Souls. We've got Upstairs Neighbors introducing Bottoms. That is currently sold out. We do have a standby line. We usually are able to get you in. But I offer a completely alternate awesome night where you come to the West Side, to the Aero Theater, where the guys from Office Hours Live, Tim Heidecker, DJ Doug Pound, and Vic Berger are going to be introducing a beautiful 35mm print of UHF. So you've got an abundance of riches here at the Cinematheque. But without further ado, please give a warm welcome to the host of the Greg Proops Film Club, Mr. Greg Proops.
Hello. Good evening. Hello. Oh, now the music. Hello, hooray, hurrah. Once again, we convene here for the Greg Proops Film Club. Hello, film club lovers. We are once again joined here at the culmination of cinema in Hollywood, the Los Feliz 3, here at the American Cinematheque for the Friends of the Fest. And tonight's feature is the 1967 comedy classic by Mel Brooks, The Producers. This is where you applaud. Yes, this movie is part of our ongoing series of enjoying and expressing our joy in the face of fascism. There's no better way, to tell Nazis to fuck off than to laugh in their face, ladies and gentlemen. And that is what we are here to do tonight. That is ancient. Now, Mel Brooks was named Melvin Kaminsky, and his family was from Bialystok, which is where the name comes from in the picture. I want to ask a couple things before we get going tonight. First of all, Jennifer picked this movie. She does all the programming for the Greg Proops Film Club. She's here tonight, so she can hear you in the back. Last month we showed Paris is Burning, and which I think is an amazing example of joy in the face of oppression. And then tonight, of course, The Producers. Here's a couple questions I want to ask. How many people, by applause, have never seen the movie before? There you are. And so I presume the rest of you have. And let me ask one last question. By applause, how many people have seen the movie like a zillion times? Yeah, I thought so. The thing about this movie is, for the people who haven't seen it, once you see it, you'll never stop quoting it the rest of your life. Jennifer and I speak in lines from this movie. I have a friend, Debbie Durst, in San Francisco, who's a comedian, and her and I literally talk to each other in dialogue from this movie. It is a very, very quotable movie. And I would say about Mel Brooks, for those of you who haven't seen it before, you have to understand that this movie is made by a person who served in World War II, and their sensibilities aren't exactly up to the moment. Although the moment that we're in right now, I think these sensibilities are called for more than ever. In other words, what are you getting at, Greg? There's burlesque jokes in it. Mel Brooks is not known for taste and restraint. I would say vulgarity, dick jokes, fart jokes, tit jokes, Jew jokes, gay jokes, old people jokes. Am I missing anything? He really covers the waterfront. And so if there's delicate sensibilities involved, it's pretty important that you leave them aside, stuff your mouth with raisinets, and enjoy this fucking thing on its own terms. Because you really can't readjust for 1967 when really his sensibilities, I think, for a lot of this movie are, let's just say, 40s. He served in World War II, and I remember a quote from a Playboy magazine interview when he was at the height of his career in the mid-70s, and he said, I was in an artillery crew, but I didn't know how to read the meters, and so I'd say a little to the left, a little to the right, to aim the guns, right? And then the guy said, how'd it go for you in World War II? And Mel Brooks said, I had my ass shot off, and so now I wear a peach crate and I shit pears. And exactly. He actually was in a mine removing crew during World War II. And I think Nazis were a big part of, let's just say, anyone from then, as they are for us. And he said, the film was a way to enact vengeance through comedy. The only real way I could get even with Hitler and company, was to bring them down with laughter. He also said, I'm the only Jew to make a buck off of Hitler. Exactly. Here's something. He won the Academy Award that year. This movie wasn't a hit. I think its opening weekend, it made like $5,000. And this was in 1967 when movies cost $1.25 or whatever, but it literally just didn't do much at all. And then Peter Sellers saw it at a personal screening. By the way, he begged Peter Sellers to be in this movie. He really did, because Peter Sellers was just the living end in 1967. He was. When I was a little kid, there was like, Peter Sellers was like Lord God comedy. This is before Python, before they came here. Or we got them on telly. And Peter Sellers didn't do it. Peter Sellers was often distracted, as I recall, a story about Mel Brooks following him around Harrods and explaining the movie to him, and Peter Sellers going, look at this camera, right? So anyway, he was at a screening at his, I think at his house, and they were gonna watch some Italian movie, and instead they screened this movie. And the next thing, Peter Sellers put a giant full page ad in Variety saying that this movie was fucking funny. And it saved the picture. Yeah, yeah. That was a very strange Haunted Mansion laugh. Could it be your cadaverous pallor betrays an aura of foreboding? Could you sense a disquieting metamorphosis? So he won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. And this is the year that 2001. And guess who's coming to dinner? Katharine Hepburn won her 74th Oscar this year for Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which is also quite a lovely movie, if somewhat, period. And Frank Sinatra read it out on television. And he went, the winner for Best Original Screenplay, The Producers, Mel Brooks. And Mel Brooks yelled from the crowd, look at the page again, because he didn't think it could be him. And he had to go up, and he hadn't written a fucking speech. And he got up on stage and went, thank you, and he extemporized, right, because he's funny. So then, of course, this is the first picture he directed. All of the pictures after this, I remember going to see Young Frankenstein at the Ghirardelli Theater in San Francisco, and people were screaming at the credits of Young Frankenstein. Before the movie started, Mel Brooks went from making this picture and then the 12 Chairs, which kind of came and went, to Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, Right Then High Anxiety Doll. And at that point, he was an unstoppable force in comedy. And he was considered the broad, crude one. And the other Jewish filmmaker, who we won't mention, who's visiting Russia to celebrate their oppression of the Ukrainians, was considered the erudite intellectual one. And this is, I think, his grandest moment. I mean, it's not, you know, history will bear me out. The reason why this movie succeeds on 1,000 levels is that it's rich with heart. There's a relationship at the center of it. And I think that's the essence of all comedy that people remember as well as they do. Not only is it hysterically funny for all of the gags and making fun of Nazis and whatnot, including the daffiest Nazi you will see on screen. Ken Mars evidently slept in his costume. When the people who haven't seen the movie yet, you'll see soon who Ken Mars is. He plays the Nazi who wrote the play that they do, and his name is Franz Liebkind, and he has pigeon shit on his Nazi helmet, and that was Ken Mars' idea. They were all a little afraid of him, I think. And then, of course, Ken Mars, if you remember him, is never a star of a movie, but is genius in a load of 60s and 70s comedies, including Butch Cassidy, where he plays the sheriff who tries to raise a posse to chase them while they're watching him try to raise the posse. He's the police captain in Young Frankenstein. And in What's Up, Doc, which we've shown at the film club, I love it too. Thank you, darling. By the way, what's up, Doc? I'm coming back to Ken Mars. What's up, Doc? Woman on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Pillow Talk. I might be missing one or two. Got the most laughs of any movies we've ever shown. I mean, literally people screaming and crying. And Ken Mars plays a fake Croatian intellectual expert on music. And what's up, Doc? And does an accent like this. I have read your dissertation, and I find it fatuous. Like that, just unbelievably good. Then gangsters come in one scene to shoot them, and Ken Mars goes, "Don't shoot, I'm part Italian." The cast of this movie is beyond. Mel Brooks was married to Anne Bancroft, and she was a Broadway star at the time when he was a writer, and he was coming up. He'd been on your show of shows with Sid Caesar and whatnot, and this was right before he developed Get Smart for television, which was a spy spoof sitcom with Don Adams. Yeah, someone just went. I can't even explain Don Adams. We need like a whole year. There's some comedians from the 60s that are literally inexplicable. I don't even know how to try to translate them into 2025. In any case, Anne Bancroft was this hot actress, and she had won an Academy Award for The Miracle Worker, where she played Helen Keller's, Anne Sullivan, the woman who got Helen Keller to be able to sign and react to the world in a more stable way. Of course, The Miracle Worker is fantastically diminishing of Helen Keller in so much as it stops when Helen Keller's a child. Helen Keller went on to be one of the great intellectual feminist moralists of the 20th century. And Helen Keller wrote books and did lectures. She was deaf, dumb, and blind. I'm telling you, she wrote books and gave lectures all around the world for the rest of her life on women's rights, on disability, on humanity. And of course, because Hollywood, we don't like to deal with women after they reach maturity. And then once they reach maturity, as Goldie Hawn says in First Wives Club, there's 3 ages for women in movies: Babe, DA, and Driving Miss Daisy. And so, in this movie, we have Babe. Mel Brooks met Anne Bancroft, and she was doing a play on Broadway, and Gene Wilder was in the play with her. And the play was Mother Courage, which is not a comedy. And Gene Wilder was in the play, and they went to coffee after one night, and Gene Wilder said, "They're laughing at me every time I come on stage. And I'm telling you, if you see Mother Courage, you won't laugh." And Mel Brooks said to him, "Have you seen your face?" He cast him because he's insanely vulnerable. And we all love Gene Wilder, and you know Gene Wilder. And he is a beautiful person on screen. The inner core of his vulnerability is the engine that runs his comedy. So when he becomes hysterical, and when Gene Wilder goes over the top, like in Young Frankenstein and every movie that he's in, except for maybe Bonnie and Clyde, which he had made just before this, because he's kind of an asshole single guy in Bonnie and Clyde. But almost all of his movies, he really has insane internal energy mixed with an almost undescribable vulnerability. He played, I don't know if you're familiar with the show and the book of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. The Broadway show of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest that Michael Douglas made into the movie that he produced, that made with Jack Nicholson, that Milos Forman directed. The reason why Michael Douglas owned the property was Kirk Douglas was the star of the Broadway play. He played McMurphy, and Gene Wilder was Billy Bibbit, who is a very sensitive neurotic in the play who can't function in society and has committed himself to a mental hospital. And so Mel Brooks saw all those things in him and put him with Zero Mostel. Zero Mostel is like watching a tornado on screen. He is an absolute protean force, a swirling vortex of comedy. He could sing, he could dance, he's bellicose. And Gene Wilder was mortified of meeting him, right? So they brought him onto the set, and he goes, and this is from his book, he goes, "I came onto the set, and Zero was there to meet me." And he was like, he stuck out his hand to like go, "Hi, Zero." And Zero Mostel picked him up and kissed him on the lips. And he goes, "After that, he treated me like a baby sparrow." And that's the crux of this movie. Their relationship, what they do for each other, what they bring out for each other, and let's get to the essence of it, the Jewiness. And thank you. You're welcome. Never be ashamed. This is from a 1974 interview with Mel Brooks. Were you surprised The Producers became a cult film? Mel Brooks, I'm always surprised. Because I always feel it's a very personal thing, and maybe 3 Jews on a bus somewhere in Brooklyn are going to enjoy it. I'm amazed the world likes it, what I'm doing, because it's like private letters I write to myself. And I thought this is something you never hear from Mel Brooks, a very a guarded, erudite side. Robert Louis Stevenson said he wrote books for himself and a few close friends. And isn't it marvelous that the public defrays the cost of postage? I'm the same way. I never think anything I do has any value outside of the room. So I met Gene Wilder in London in 1996, I think. I was living in London, and I was doing comedy and whatnot, and I was doing improv. So that was a joke. As the English say about improv, why not prepare something funny? And I got hired to do the entertainment channel for an airline when they used to have that spiel, right? You'd be on the plane, and then when there was one screen, and they would go, the person would come on and go, hey, when you're in London, you should go see this, go see that. And they had me interview all these fascinating people. I interviewed Terrence Conrad, who was a restaurateur and lifestyle, I don't know how to describe Terrence Conrad. He has a shop in London. Let me put it this way. Olive oil in England in the 60s was sold in what they would call an apothecary, a chemist. We would call it a drugstore. You had to ask for olive oil over the counter at a drugstore. They didn't sell it at grocery stores. This was the English palate in the 60s. Terrence Conrad brought olive oil out into the restaurant. That was where they were at culinarily, or culinarily, if you wish to be a complete arsehole. Are you being patronizing? I think you'll find that's patronizing. So I interviewed Terrence Conrad. I interviewed Madhur Jaffrey, who is fantastically married to Saeed Jaffrey, the great movie star, who's in all the Merchant Ivory films, and is, as you call, Billy Fish in the movie The Man Who Would Be King. And I got to interview all these people, and they had me interview Gene Wilder. He was doing a play on the West End called Laughter on the 54th Floor, written by Neil Simon about Sid Caesar, one of 750 plays that Neil Simon wrote about his time writing on the Sid Caesar show. Now, Mel Brooks was on the original show of shows, right? He was a writer on it. And he said Zero Mostel made him laugh harder than anyone he ever knew except Sid Caesar. Sid Caesar was his top. Sid Caesar was gigantic, 6'4". And in the 50s, when they were making the show, they would do an hour and a half every Saturday night, and Sid Caesar would take amphetamine and drink to come down from the amphetamine. And they did a live show with Sid Caesar cranked out of his mind with Carl Reiner and Imogen Coca. And it was fucking nonstop boogie, full tilt, fucking rrr. And Sid Caesar, legendarily, held Mel Brooks out of the 54th floor by his legs like this, because Sid Caesar was extraordinarily strong. And he put him in Silent Movie. If you ever see Silent Movie, Sid Caesar comes in at the end of the movie, and he's wearing a hat, and they made him kind of an entrepreneur, an impresario. In any case, if there's one person on earth, and you've seen the movie My Favorite Year, right, with Peter O'Toole, Joe Bologna plays Sid Caesar in that movie. Well, Joe Bologna is a gigantic comedian. He's 6'3", and he's loud, right? Gene Wilder played Sid Caesar in this. So I'm not saying it was poor casting, because I love Gene Wilder beyond all measure. But there's a scene in Laughter on the 54th Floor where he becomes so angry at his writing staff that he punches a hole in the wall in the play, right? And they've clearly, at one of the flats, got an area where it's paper so that he could go, God damn it, you people are nothing. And he punches the wall, which Sid Caesar often did, right? Sid Caesar threw chairs. He fucking hit, like he was crazy, right? Mind you, like I said, he was doing an hour and a half show every Saturday on amphetamine, so his mental state was shaky. And Gene Wilder punches the hole in the wall, and you could almost see the cross on the flat where the paper mark was. And Gene Wilder punched it like this. So I went backstage and I got to interview him before a show one night. And I asked him about Richard Pryor. And I asked him about Young Frankenstein had just been on TV 2 nights before. And England had 4 stations then. 4 stations and no cable. 4. And it was on BBC 2 at 10 o'clock. And I said, what about Young Frankenstein, Gene? And he went, I watched it recently. And I was like, recently? You watched it 2 nights ago like I did. We all watched it. Everyone in England watched it. It was the only fucking thing on 2 nights ago. I didn't say that. He goes, and this is Gene Wilder, I watched it recently, and I thought I was a little over the top. So, we have to start the picture, but I want to talk very briefly about Dick Shawn. Dick Shawn is in this Mel Brooks movie and no other. In 1977, before anyone had one-man shows, Dick Shawn had been in loads of pictures and had been on in the Catskills and was a stand-up comedian, all these things. Did a show called The Second Greatest Entertainer in the Whole Wide World. Now, excuse me, it started in New York, and then they brought it to the West Coast, where it played here in Beverly Hills. Excuse me. It played in San Francisco. I'm from San Carlos, the whitest place on earth, home of the Plain Yogurt Festival. And take the fruit out, the powerful taste is burning our tongue. We hate that spicy ethnic fare, where One Direction is found in the hip-hop section. And how white was it? It's so blazingly white, Morgan Freeman narrates this. So my comedy partner and I drove from San Carlos to San Francisco to the Alcazar Theater to see Dick Shawn in The Second Greatest Entertainer in the Whole Wide World. And the show was, the premise was, there's an empty stage, and you're in a horrible backstage, like a dump, right? And there's a pile of garbage in the stage. And everybody filed into the theater, and we sat there for half an hour. Then the lights went down, and Dick Shawn popped out of the pile of garbage. Been there the whole time. Then he's a second-rate comic, and he gets up, and he's workshopping his act. So he does all these bits. And Dick Shawn, as you recall, unbelievably elegant and fluid, right? Dick Shawn didn't tell jokes. Dick Shawn did scenarios, and it was always like that. There was always a balletic jazz dance, beatnik, like hipster underlying thing to it. So he works through all these jokes in the first half, and he's got the audience fucking completely wrapped up. Then he did a beat poem about the black man who broke in and found the Watergate break-in, right? That started with a black cat found the tapes, right? Yeah, this is the show that I saw when I was 16 years old. I wanted to be a comedian, and seeing Dick Shawn was like watching fucking Albert Einstein, you know, like read a poetry from a stela in the town square. It was just astonishing, right? So, and I'm not done. So he does this part, and then the second part of the show, he goes to sleep under the pile of garbage for the whole intermission. Then the second half of the show, and he pops out of the garbage again, right? Like, then he does his act, and they go, the Pump Room presents Johnny Stank. And he comes out and does all the jokes he did in the first part, and they die because he's a hack. So if you can get your mind around the concept of doing all the material, killing with it, then coming back on and doing it again as a shitty comic. Yeah, I mean, like, right. And then he comes back on, and he's like Sammy Davis Jr. He's called Fabulously Fantastic Jr. And his theme song went, "My name is Fabulously Fantastic Jr. For short, you can call me Fab Fanty Jew." Then the show's over, and now we're all fucking gone crazy because it was a tour de force. And I never have used that word in my life. I just used it for the first time. It was a tour de force, right? And he stayed on stage and went, does anyone have any questions? So now I don't know how long he's been on, right? Because he was there before we started. He stayed during the interval, and the intermission, and then he stayed on and answered questions at the end. I have no idea why Mel Brooks picked him for the movie, because Mel Brooks, must have read 30 interviews for tonight, and not once does he mention why he picked Dick Shawn. Suffice to say, Dick Shawn steals his part of the movie harder than anyone's ever stolen any part of a movie before, as Lorenzo St. Dubois. And you'll find a zillion other great actors in this movie. And so I give you tonight, starring Zira Mostel, Gene Wilder, Dick Shawn, Kenneth Mars, Lee Meredith, Christopher Hewitt, who you'll never forget in this, Andreas Voutsinis, and the fantastic Estelle Winwood in Mel Brooks' magnum opus from 1967, The Producers. They'll be in them while they